I was the youngest criminal profiler in the history of the MPD, able to paint a complete picture of a killer from the faintest of traces. Countless cold cases were closed because of me, but I willingly destroyed my own career to become a prisoner. It was because of my past life. The new consultant, Julian Croft, called himself an empath, claiming he could sync with a criminal's mind and experience their crimes directly. During the investigation of the serial killer dubbed the Crimson Artist, he would always announce the killer's profile and M.O. identical to my own reports, just before I could finish my own analysis. I refused to believe in that many coincidences and fought desperately to prove my own worth. But every time, he would beat me to the punch with every key clue, his conclusions matching my own painstaking deductions to the letter. He would even counsel me, saying, Dr. Reed, your methods are outdated, a relic of a bygone era. Don't be so stubborn. Soon enough, my superiors and colleagues decided I was just jealous of his talent. I became a disgrace to the department. I was kicked off the force and, in the end, brutally tortured and murdered by the real killer. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day Julian Croft first walked into the department, smiling at me with an utterly guileless face. Reed, have you finished the preliminary profile on the Crimson Artist case? The harsh fluorescent lights made me squint. I heard the impatient voice of my superior, Captain Marcus Thorne. The Crimson Artist case? A jolt went through me. I had been reborn, sent back to Julian Croft's very first day with the MPD. Before I could speak, a gentle voice cut in beside me. Captain, wait a second. I think I'm feeling something. The new consultant, Julian Croft, closed his eyes as if seeing a vision. The killer, male, around 30, has a higher education in the arts. He's pathologically obsessed with his own creations. He hates all imperfect art. Every word he uttered was identical to the report on my laptop, a report that had taken me 3 days of sleepless work to complete and which I hadn't yet made public. A dead silence fell over the room, followed by a wave of hushed, astonished whispers. The younger detective's gazes shifted from curiosity to awe. Dr. Reed, compared to Mr. Croft, your traditional methods seem a little slow, don't they? The guy closes his eyes and knows everything. You've been on that report for 3 days. You telling me you still don't have as much as he just felt? Don't say that, Detective, Julian said, opening his eyes at the perfect moment to reveal his gift. I've had this ability since I was a child. They call it empathy. It helps me sync with a criminal's thoughts, to experience the crime as it happens. He looked at me, his expression sincere. Dr. Reed, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Sometimes the feeling just comes to me. I can't control it. In my past life, this was the act that had infuriated me, making me challenge him on the spot and setting me on the path to being branded as jealous of a superior talent. The memories of being cornered by him, isolated by my colleagues, and tortured to death by the killer churned in my mind, threatening to swallow me whole. But this time, I didn't fly off the handle and scream accusations like I did before. I just watched his performance quietly, waiting until he'd spoken his last word before slowly rising to my feet. Mr. Croft, that's incredible. What you just described is perfectly consistent with my own analysis and deductions. I handed my report to Captain Thorne. Captain, take a look. It's a word-for-word match. Thorne took the report, his eyes darting between the two of us with suspicion. A flicker of shock crossed Julian's face, so quick it was almost invisible. He clearly hadn't expected this reaction from me. I didn't give him a moment to recover. I pressed on, my voice filled with eager admiration. Mr. Croft, since you can sync with the killer's mind, could you empathize the next dump site for us? Or better yet, his exact location right now? That would save us a lot of time. We might even be able to save the next victim. The murmuring in the room grew louder. Is that even possible? Does a real empath ability actually exist? I don't know, I still think Dr. Reed's methods are more reliable. What are you talking about? This is a huge world. Anything can happen. What Julian just showed us puts him right on par with Reed. Every eye in the room was now fixed on Julian Croft. I saw him freeze in his chair. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I held my smile, watching him. Go on, keep empathizing. Without my work to steal from, let's see what you can empathize now. Julian looked at the expectant faces around him and spoke weakly. Thank you for your faith in me, Dr. Reed, but my ability takes a tremendous toll. The information I can get is limited. We'll still have to rely on you. He used that excuse to sidestep the challenge for now. But I didn't believe for a second there was any such thing as an empath. I was convinced Julian Croft was stealing my work. Armed with every memory of the Crimson Artist case from my past life, I went back to my office and wrote 2 new versions of the profile. One was a redacted version, where I deliberately omitted several key details, like the specific type of knot the killer used and the environmental characteristics of the dump sites. I saved this report in my personal folder on the department's intranet server. The other was the complete, final version. I triple encrypted it and saved it to a portable USB drive that I kept on my person. At the case briefing the next day, Julian was once again the center of attention. He closed his eyes, his brow furrowed, putting on the same act as if he were personally reliving the crime. I see it. When the killer binds his victims, he uses a simple slip knot, which makes it easier for him to adjust the pose of his artwork. And the dump sites he chooses are always near open, public parks. Every detail he described was a perfect match for the redacted report I had left on the server. I had a cold smile. Got him. Mr. Croft is a miracle worker. Rick Jensen piped up again, singing his praises. This is the first time I've seen anyone besides Dr. Reed produce such a precise analysis. Detective Chloe Evans added. I ignored them, looking directly at Captain Thorne. Captain, regarding Mr. Croft's empathy, I have a few supplemental points. As I spoke, I reached into my pocket, ready to pull out the USB drive that held the truth. But just then, Julian suddenly sat bolt upright, interrupting me. Wait, there's the vision. It's getting clearer. The entire conference room fell silent. It's a double Bolin knot, an extremely rare nautical knot. It's not for adjusting the pose, it's for securing it permanently. And the dump sites aren't parks. They're cedar groves near a water source. The killer has a specific fixation on cedar trees. My hand froze halfway to my pocket. What he just said were the two most critical details I had deliberately hidden in my complete report. How was that possible? That file was triple encrypted. Besides me, no one else could have possibly seen it. My God, that's just on another level. It's like he can see the future. My colleagues' gasps of amazement filled the room. The way they looked at Julian was now bordering on worship. When they looked back at me, their eyes were filled with naked suspicion and contempt. I mechanically pulled out the USB drive, plugged it into the laptop, and opened the complete report. When the document was projected onto the screen, my final conclusions were identical, word for word, to what Julian had just empathized. Jensen's face was a mask of undisguised mockery. What's this, Reed? You wait for Mr. Croft to say his piece, then you pull out a matching report? I thought you had some brilliant insight for us. Turns out you're just a copycat. Told your methods were obsolete. Should have just listened. A profound sense of helplessness washed over me. I looked at Julian. He met my gaze, still wearing the humble mask of a newcomer, but his eyes were gleaming with triumph and provocation. I threw all my energy into the case. At the next briefing, I spoke before anyone else could. This time, I included every single detail I could excavate from the memories of my past life, from the killer's psychological profile to the type of victim he would likely choose next. When I finished, the room was silent. Even the ever-critical Captain Thorne showed a hint of approval. Then, Julian stood up. He wasn't even looking at any notes. Dr. Reed's analysis is very good, but I'd like to add one point regarding the killer's next crime scene. He closed his eyes, resuming his charlatan's pose. I see. An abandoned factory on the south side. It's called Apex Industrial Works. My blood ran cold. Apex Industrial Works. In my last life, that was where I was tortured and killed, where I became one of the Crimson Artist's creations. How could he know that? Unless he was reborn too. The thought exploded in my mind like a thunderclap. After the meeting, I cornered him. Mr. Croft, my late father used to love a place on the south side called the Bluebird Diner. He said they had the best single-origin Ethiopian coffee. I was wondering if you'd be interested in trying it sometime. The Bluebird Diner was a complete fabrication. The place I was thinking of had been shut down for a year before I died, after the owners moved out of the country. If he was from my timeline, he would know that. But he simply answered with perfect composure. Of course. I happen to be a bit of a coffee aficionado myself. It would be an honor to try something your father enjoyed. He agreed. He had no idea the Bluebird Diner was gone. He wasn't reborn. Then how did he know about Apex Industrial Works? He wasn't reborn, yet he could accurately predict the future. Or rather, accurately plagiarize my memories. An invisible hand seemed to be closing around my throat, suffocating me. Because now I knew. The killer's target was me. I stormed into Captain Thorne's office and laid out my theory. Captain, the killer's next target is me. I'm requesting special protection. Thorne looked at me, his expression complicated. Reed, I know you're under a lot of pressure, but you can't make accusations based on nothing. This isn't nothing. I was practically screaming. Apex Industrial Works is the stage he's already chosen. In the end, he agreed. Maybe it was out of respect for my late father, who had been his partner. I was placed under heavy protection, with 2 officers assigned to me 24 hours a day. 3 days later, the 4th body appeared. It wasn't at Apex Industrial Works. It was in an abandoned building on the west side. And the victim wasn't me. It was a woman I had never seen before. The entire department exploded. My request for a protective detail had become a massive joke. What the hell are you playing at, Reed? Faking a threat just to get some attention. Rick Jensen was the first to attack. We followed your lead on Apex Industrial Works, staked it out for 3 whole days. 3 days. And what happened? The killer struck right under our noses somewhere else. Do you have any idea how much manpower was wasted protecting you? I think she's lost her mind, trying to one-up Croft. I stood there, speechless, as my colleagues hurled accusations at me. Thorne called me into his office. Reed, the team is furious with you. Effective immediately, you're on administrative leave. Stay away from this case. As I walked out of his office, a bottomless feeling of powerlessness consumed me. I knew the captain was trying to protect me. In my past life, he was the only one who stood by me when no one else believed me. But I had a second chance. Was I still doomed to watch myself walk toward my own destruction? After being kicked off the team, I spent my days in the records room, surrounded by old case files. The Crimson Artist case, after my departure, hit a dead end. Then one day, I got a call from Captain Thorne. Reed, the department needs you. Croft says his empathy is taking too much of a toll on him. He says he can't use it for a while. Knowing lives were at stake, I didn't hesitate. I agreed to return to the department. I'll come back, I said, on one condition. I need an office that is completely soundproof, and I personally inspect every piece of electronic equipment inside it. Thorne frowned, but desperate to solve the case, he finally nodded. Done. I returned to the force and was given my own controllable safe house. I formulated a plan I called double-blind analysis. This wasn't just about solving the case anymore. It was about uncovering Julian Croft's secret. First, using all the equipment, I spent a great deal of time constructing a deliberately flawed profile of the killer. Then I shut everything down. Using the most primitive tools, pen and paper, I wrote out my real deductions inside the soundproof room. At the next case briefing, I waited for Julian to speak. To my surprise, he remained uncharacteristically silent. A powerful sense of unease crept over me, but I stood up anyway. I presented the true analysis I had written out by hand, exactly as it was. The next victim will most likely be a postal worker. The next location points to the second overpass on the east side, the Milburn Avenue overpass. The words had barely left my mouth when Captain Thorne slammed his hand on the table and shot to his feet, energized. Deploy immediately. Surround the overpass. This time, we get him red-handed. The atmosphere in the room ignited. Everyone was eager for the takedown. Hours later, in the command center, the initial excitement had slowly curdled into a dead silence. The same report came over the radio, again and again. Captain, all clear at the overpass. No suspicious activity. Captain, checkpoint 1 is clear. Captain, checkpoint 2 is clear. Each report was like a slap across my face. A slap across everyone's face. Just then, Julian, who had been silent this whole time, suddenly began to tremble. Captain, he stammered. I just saw it. The next victim. He's in a warehouse on the west side docks. Pier 4. As he finished speaking, a call came in from an officer on the scene, his voice shaking. Captain, we just got a call from the west side. They found another victim. My heart sank. Chloe Evans screamed at me. Are you messing with us again? Are you sick? She's so desperate for credit, she's willing to risk lives. This outcome was beyond anything I had anticipated. I had assumed Julian would once again preemptively announce my findings. Instead, he had done nothing, and in doing so, had made the case even more convoluted. Smack, you're fighting with Croft over some stupid ego trip. You're playing games with people's lives? You son of a bitch. A fist from Jensen sent me sprawling to the floor. The other detectives just watched with cold eyes, as if I deserved it. I looked through the crowd at Julian. He stood there calmly, an island of peace in the storm, his eyes fixed on me with a look of pure provocation and mockery. In a flash, a wild idea exploded in my mind. I understood. I understood everything. I met the murderous glares of my colleagues, swallowed the metallic taste of blood in my throat, and forced myself to speak. Captain, Detective Jensen is right. That sentence silenced the entire room. Even the rage on Jensen's face froze. It was me. I was jealous of Mr. Croft. I was jealous that he came in and stole my spotlight. Jealous that everyone fawned over him. So I wanted to prove I was better than him. The intel about the overpass. I fabricated it. I gave you the wrong location on purpose because I wanted to see him fail. I wanted all of you to see that the genius you all trust can make mistakes too. My words were like a lit fuse on a bomb. The faces of the surrounding detectives went from pale to ashen to a dark, furious iron gray. Their chests heaved, and many of the hands pointing at me were shaking uncontrollably. You psycho. Jensen was the first to recover, roaring as he charged at me. You used a human life as your stepping stone. You're a piece of garbage. You're a disgrace to this department. Chloe Evans, her face flushed with anger, kicked me hard in the knee. This time, no one stood by. Someone shoved me violently from behind, and I stumbled to my knees. Fists and feet rained down on me. Beat him to death. People like him don't deserve to be cops. Get out of the MPD. We don't have colleagues like you. He's got no shame. Scum of the earth. A sharp pain shot through my ribs. My head was slammed again and again against the cold, hard floor. The insults, the blows, the sounds of disgust wove themselves into a giant net, trapping me completely. I stopped fighting back, letting my body absorb the punishment. Enough. Captain Thorne's roar finally put a stop to the one-sided assault. 2 officers hauled me up from the floor. My entire body ached. My face was a mess of blood and grime. I looked like a stray dog. I lifted my head and looked at Thorne. The fury on his face had been replaced by a look of profound, heartbroken disappointment. It took all the strength I had to speak. Captain, I was wrong. I obstructed a federal investigation and falsified intelligence. My crimes are unforgivable. I request to be taken into custody. As the words left my mouth, the hands holding me up loosened. They stared at me in disbelief, as if I had truly lost my mind. Captain Thorne stared at me, his gaze unwavering, for a full 30 seconds before finally making his decision. Cuff him. The final word was spoken. The cold metal locked around my wrists, but it brought me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I looked through the crowd at Julian Croft. Slowly, I broke into a grin. Julian, I'm admitting to all of this. Not because I've lost, but because I finally know your secret. During my suspension, I hadn't been idle. I had turned the archives upside down, re-examining every bloody, bizarre, and unsolved case file. And I found a breakthrough. I was shocked to discover that the Crimson Artist case bore a stunning resemblance to the Campus Carver case from 3 years ago. In both strings of murders, the killer's actions seemed random, but the motives were traceable. The victims appeared to have no connection, yet the M.O. was identical. Every murder was like the completion of a piece of art. I had once thought the killer was merely pursuing some pathological sense of ritual. Until that last meeting. My 2-pronged plan was originally designed to probe Julian's secret, but his reaction opened up a new line of thinking. He was too eager to perform, eager to take all the credit for himself. And it was that very eagerness that gave him away. He knew every step of the killer's plan. There was a mole in the department. That thought, like a bolt of lightning, cut through all the fog. Why could the killer always anticipate my every move? Why, in my past life, was I a victim in this case, but this time the targeted murder never happened? Why had the case deviated from its original path and turned into a personal vendetta against me? Because I was the only variable. The killer, or the killer's accomplice, was right here among us. They were monitoring our every move in real time. Looked at another way, what if this wasn't art? What if it was revenge? 3 years ago, the Campus Carver case, with its bloody, bizarre, and grotesque nature, cast a crimson shadow over the entire year. When the killer was caught, he had said one thing. The art is not finished. Everyone thought it was the raving of a madman. Now I knew it may have been a preview. To test this theory, I had gotten myself sent to prison. Because if my theory was correct, then prison, for me, was the safest place in the world. And there was someone I needed to see. The true killer from the Campus Carver case 3 years ago, Elias Vance. Codename, the Artisan. A cold voice echoed in the interrogation room. State your name. Evelyn Reed. Profession. Criminal profiler. As I said the words, the officer across from me let out a sneer. You think you deserve that title? Falsifying intelligence. Obstructing justice. Do you have any idea that the girl who died because of you still hasn't had her eyes closed? I said nothing, just watched him quietly. I plead guilty. The officer froze, the torrent of insults he had prepared caught in his throat. What did you say? I plead guilty. I repeated, my voice unervingly calm. I signed a confession and pressed my thumbprint onto the page. No straged, no excuses. My calmness was so absolute it made them all uneasy. I was escorted to the prison transport. As I walked down the corridor, I saw Captain Thorne. He looked at me. His lips moved, but I gave him a steady, reassuring look in return. In the end, he said nothing, just closed his eyes in anguish. In prison, I saw Elias Vance just as I planned. Back in the MPD conference room, you could hear a pin drop. Captain Thorne projected a file onto the large screen. Elias Vance, the serial killer codenamed the Artisan from 3 years ago, was secretly apprehended a year ago. He is currently incarcerated at Northgate Penitentiary. The correctional officer responsible for his psychological evaluation died last month in an accident. We found a transfer of $500,000 in his bank records. Mr. Croft, using the credentials of a psychological researcher, you visited Elias Vance 17 times in the last year. Is that correct? Thorne displayed the prison visitation logs and the dead guard's bank statements. The room was stunned. Everyone looked at Julian with a mixture of shock and confusion. Julian suddenly smiled. Faced with Thorne's questions, he met everyone's gaze without flinching. Captain, you must know that in addition to being an empath, my real profession is as a psychological researcher, studying the minds of criminals, gaining a deep understanding of their motives for murder. Isn't that our duty? Is there a problem with what Julian did? I was studying him to prevent more tragedies from happening. His voice was not loud, but it resonated with conviction. A few of the younger officers even nodded in agreement. That's right, Mr. Croft had always been the department's brain trust. He must have had his reasons. Rick Jensen let out a long sigh of relief, even looking at Captain Thorne with a hint of annoyance. Exactly, Captain. What's wrong with what he did? We've all seen how accurate his profiles are. You can't just start suspecting our own people because of what Reed did. Is he really one of our own? The heavy door to the conference room creaked open. I stepped in silhouetted against the light. I should have been in a prison jumpsuit, but instead, I was wearing a clean department uniform. When my colleagues saw me, their eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Jensen's face turned the color of a beet, his fists clenching so tight his knuckles cracked. Reed, what are you doing here? Who let you out? Dozens of pairs of eyes were fixed on me. I ignored them, my gaze sweeping past faces filled with shock and anger until it locked onto the figure huddled in the corner. Julian Croft. Under normal circumstances, for a psychological researcher, your actions would be perfectly justifiable, I said. But what if your subject was your mentor? In that case, Mr. Croft, I have to ask, were your motives really so pure? My words landed like a sledgehammer, striking every person in the room. Panic flashed in Julian's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. That's absurd, Dr. Reed. You need evidence for accusations like that. Evidence. I smiled and pressed play. A recording began to fill the silent conference room, each word amplified. It was my conversation with Elias Vance in prison. My voice on the recording was calm. The new Crimson artist. He's imitating you. Vance's sneer was audible. Imitating me? He's not worthy. A little punk who plays cheap empathy tricks dares to call himself an artist. In the conference room, everyone held their breath. Empathy. On the recording, I continued, laying the bait. But he idolizes you. Julian Croft. He sees you as a god. A god? Vance's laughter cut off abruptly, replaced by a furious roar. That traitor. I taught him how to appreciate fear, how to sculpt death. I told him to lie low, to wait for the right moment. And what did he do? He jumped the gun to steal the credit, to prove he was better than me. He even killed people he wasn't supposed to. He destroyed everything we planned. He's not my creation. He's just an impatient, credit-grabbing hack. The recording ended. Dead silence. The conference room was as quiet as a tomb. Jensen, Evans, and the others looked on in utter disbelief, the color draining from their faces. All the colleagues who had once supported Julian were now staring at him, as if he were a monster. Julian completely fell apart. No, that's not true. He's lying. I didn't. Elias Vance has been locked up in Northgate Penitentiary. He couldn't have committed any more murders. I stared daggers at Julian, enunciating every word. Which means the killer this time is you, Julian Croft. That murder on the West Side. You deliberately left clues to frame me, to eliminate the one person who could see through your act. I threw a DNA analysis report in his face. There were 2 DNA profiles on the murder weapon. One belonged to the victim. The other is a perfect match for the saliva you left on your coffee cup. The air solidified. A tremor went through Julian's body, as if his bones had dissolved, and he collapsed to the floor. So much for the damn empath. He was the killer himself. After several seconds of dead silence, he suddenly burst into heart-wrenching sobs. I didn't want to. His voice was hoarse, filled with anguish. None of you have no idea what my life was like. That house. It wasn't a home, it was hell. Every time my father got drunk, he'd tie me up and whip me with his belt. Look, he even tried to pull at his collar, his expression tragic. I still have the scars. I just wanted to live like a human being. It was Vance. He found me. When I was at my lowest point, he said he understood me, that he could save me. He was like a devil, corroded my mind bit by bit. He said those people were filthy, that they all deserved to die. He controlled me. I couldn't fight back. He wept, painting himself as a pitiful soul struggling on the edge of good and evil, powerless to save himself. Some of the younger female detectives were already red-eyed, their faces filled with pity. Even Rick Jensen's furious expression wavered for a moment. Julian saw a glimmer of hope. He scrambled toward me like a drowning man grasping at a straw, tilting his tear-streaked face up to mine. Evelyn, you're the expert. You're the best profiler there is. You understand, don't you? You understand the pain of a split personality. It wasn't me. It was the other devil inside me who was killing people. Save me. Please, I'm begging you, save me. He clutched at my pant leg, his words desperate, his eyes full of pleading and hope. I knelt, looking directly into the eyes that were trying so hard to win my sympathy. Then I smiled. But the girl you nailed to a drawing directly into the eyes that were trying so hard to win my sympathy. Then I smiled. But the girl you nailed to a drawing board and turned into a crimson art piece. She was 19. What did she do wrong? With every word I spoke, the color drained further from Julian's face. The female detectives who had been on the verge of tears a moment ago now looked on in horror and disgust, their sympathy frozen solid. The flicker of doubt in Jensen's eyes hardened back into a sharp edge, but this time it was aimed at the man limp on the floor. The air in the room felt like it had turned to ice. Save those words, I said. You can repent in prison. Julian's crying stopped instantly. The plea in his eyes curdled into something else entirely. The next second, he shrieked, "Bitch, I'll kill you." He lunged at me in a frenzy, ready to take me down with him. My colleagues, finally jolted from their stupor, swarmed forward, pinning him to the ground. The cold click of handcuffs finally brought the absurd farce to an end. The case was closed. Back at the department, the people who had once cursed me and beaten me lined up to apologize. Rick Jensen stood at the front, a 6-foot-tall man, crying like a baby. "Reed, I'm sorry. I was blind. I was an asshole. I was completely fooled by that monster Croft. I'm a damn fool." The people behind him bowed their heads, all muttering their apologies. But I didn't care anymore. I turned and walked away. When I was leaving for the day, Captain Thorne stopped me at the door. He handed me a signed letter of recommendation for the position of division chief. "Reed, this is what you've earned, and it's what they owe you." His voice was filled with relief and a trace of lingering fear. "That stunt you pulled, getting yourself arrested, that was a hell of a gamble. I was sweating bullets for you. I took the weighty recommendation and offered him my sincerest gratitude. Before that final meeting, I had already arranged my exit strategy and had briefed Thorne. Going to prison was a desperate move, born of necessity, but thankfully he had believed in me from start to finish, protecting me under immense pressure. It was the only reason my plan had worked so smoothly. Thorne clapped me on the shoulder. "From now on, it's their turn to worry about what you think." Months later, I left the department. It wasn't a resignation, but a transfer. I had personally submitted the application to become an instructor at the National Police Academy. My former comrades in arms couldn't understand. Rick Jensen stood blocking my office door, his eyes red and his voice hoarse. "Reed, you can't go. The team needs you." Behind him stood a sea of familiar, yet distant faces, all of them pleading with me to stay. Captain Thorne put a hand on Jensen's shoulder, signaling him to step aside. He walked up to me, his expression full of regret. "Reed, are you sure about this? Think it over. The door to this department will always be open for you." I didn't answer, just continued quietly packing the few personal items on my desk. An old photo frame, a worn-out criminal investigation notebook. "I know the department failed you before," Thorne said, his voice softer, "but Julian Croft is behind bars, and Jensen and the others have been disciplined. You have to look forward, right?" I smiled slightly. "Captain, thank you. Thank you for standing by me when everyone else had given up on me. But this isn't about any of that. This is my choice." The lecture hall at the police academy was bright and clean. I stood at the podium, presenting a comparative analysis of the two cases, the artisan and the imitator. Below me sat rows of young, bright faces, their eyes clear and shining with a thirst for knowledge. They were like blank pages, filled with a pure and unblemished desire for science and reason. True profiling is not about empathizing with evil, and it is certainly not about appointing yourself as savior. It is logic. It is evidence. It is the rigorous science of piecing together all the fragments to restore the one and only face of the truth. I saw them nodding vigorously, writing furiously in their notebooks. This was the meaning of my second life. Sunlight streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, warming me. The bone-deep chill of my past and present lives seemed, in this moment, to have been completely dispelled. My choice was the right one. Rather than catching one monster after another in the abyss, it's better to be here, planting a forest. A forest of reason, strong enough to withstand all lies and false gods. I will spend the rest of my life protecting this hard-won light,